Okay, so this is a paper by me and my co-author, Elena Weihe, who is not here today. She's a film editor, currently studying at the DFFB here in Berlin. As a quick rundown, I'll talk a little bit about what motivated us to do this, about what sort of task we set ourselves, and then sort of methods and concepts. So this is not a technical talk about movie making, what sorts of software to use, and so on, but it's more about the concepts, the ideas, the methods that movie makers use. Okay, so as a motivation, maybe I should start a different way. As a point of departure, I take the kind of scenario in which language documentation projects have created collections that sit in big archives. So in the past, I've been working in Adobe's project that did language documentation in the south of Papua New Guinea. And later I've been continuing to work in this area on a different language with an ELDP-funded project. And Mandana talked yesterday about activating this kind of material that lies in the archives. And the idea for this talk sort of came out of this International Decade of Indigenous Languages that has been announced, and it's going on at the moment. At the same time, it's a sort of a lockdown project. Obviously, I couldn't go and do field work, and many of us couldn't do that over the last years. Then sort of a mix of my personal interest in ethnographic film, and also the fact that much of the video recordings that I've made never really make it into my work. So I'm a descriptive linguist. And much of that material is then only used for linguistic description. So you might end up with a wonderful story, but out of that transcribed story, a single sentence ends up in the grammar or something. But that's a point of departure, okay. Okay, so what's the kind of task that we set ourselves? Very simple. We take a recording session from the archive and we sort of translate it into something that's appealing and comprehensible to a non-academic audience. And I had to have several attempts in the past where I've done that. So the difference now was that we are here collaborating with a professional movie editor. Sorry, I'm mixing things here. Okay, so, and the initial idea was to select two different recording sessions. So one that is sort of a minimal version where you just have the classic narrative of a single speaker, a short video, there's just one take and just one perspective, and contrast that process working on this with the sort of maximal version, which we didn't get to for this talk, which we're working on at the moment. The maximal version where you have sort of a complex event that goes over days. You have many speakers, you have many recordings, you have moving video and so on. So what I'll talk about here is basically this kind of situation. That's the video that we worked on. It's 3 minutes 35. What we see here is what you see throughout the whole movie. A little recording, single speaker. This is Madu Abai, one of my adopted fathers in the village, who tells us about a particular rainmaking ritual that he was taught by his father when he was a young boy. Okay. So the idea of this talk was how does a movie maker or a movie editor look at this kind of material? And I'm trying to, the experiences that we've made, I try to present here with these 4, let's call them concepts and ideas. So let's start with, for lack of a better term, I used the term intention. And what I had done before we started is to show Elena the kinds of movies that I had edited myself before as part of this BINE documentation project. So there are 3 videos that I've edited myself. You can find them on the collections landing page, and maybe I shouldn't point you there because after the experience now, I think they are terribly made by me for various reasons. And various technical reasons, which I don't want to go into, sort of how I treated the sound in post-editing and so on. So like I said, this is not a technical talk. But the main things, or the main 2 concepts that Elena came up with after watching this was sort of what was the intention of of recording this in the first place. While I was recording, what was my intention? What was the basic idea behind it? Why was it recorded? And I had, for those videos, never given it much thought, because when I'm there, I'm just recording well, not all the time, but I'm recording whatever I find interesting. And when I then edited those 3 movies together, I was basically showing things in a more or less chronological order as things were happening. So for example, the one, sorry, this didn't make it on the slide. So for one on top and bottom is obviously the picture is the identical picture. There's one about the local elections that took place in 2019 while I was in the village. And I basically followed whatever was happening in that small village during the whole day, without following a particular person or without following a particular place or so on. And that's how I had edited the movie later. That's what I mean by sort of, there was a lack of an intention. And we'll get to this second part that I write the other types of questions. What's sort of a structure that guides the viewer? We'll get to that in a minute. Okay. So, and also I should say, when we chose this very short video that I just showed you a screenshot before, obviously you didn't have anything to pick from. So the intention was to record this short story by Marua, who's telling a story. But for Elena, at least, she said this was pretty clear. This wasn't a problem. Anyhow, so what I call here anchor and theme, for lack of better terms, I think this would be something that makes your video both engaging, as well as something that an audience can relate to, as well as something that sort of structures the video that you work on. Okay. So these are often things like a person, obviously, or if you're recording procedurals, it might be a process, or it might be a question that guides you through a video. So for this little video, we took a sort of a personal view, and it was clear that Marua is here our protagonist. But at the same time, we didn't have, or we limited ourselves to not including more footage. So Elena's idea, not idea, but she sort of reluctantly convinced me of me playing a role in this, which I usually don't do in this kind of work. And the method we did, or the methods that we used to include myself in this video is sort of, this is the kind of metadata shot that many of us might have on their recordings, where you say today is the date, blah, 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 we're sitting in the village. And this is our speaker here. And this is the kind of material that I would always just dispose of in the first minute. And she said, no, you should keep this. And we did keep it. Then she said we should have like a little table with a photo of him and me. And maybe what's the more important one are things like to have an off text. And I'll get to the off text in a minute, but not just an off text, but an off text spoken by me. So that was later recorded, me, reading out things, explaining things. And also an off text that in its content mentions my involvement. Okay. So then the probably biggest problem with this kind of material is the missing context that we have. So you just have this short snippet and you're trying to show it to a sort of naive audience that obviously has never been to a village in this area, that doesn't share any common ground. And you have to sort of provide them with context. And the clearest context is, of course, what we do in our talks to show a map, where are we in the world, what sort of time, and so on. So this, we did this in our little video with text tables and maps and images and so on. But more those text tables in my previous videos that I had done, they were just text tables at the beginning and at the end. But here those text tables were more like presentational slides that support an off text of somebody speaking, in that case me. Okay, so that sort of provides an introduction. It also adds missing pieces of information. So in this recording about the rainmaking ritual, Marua tells us about a particular kind of container that is used for this, but he doesn't show the container because he's just sitting there. So then we show a container and a picture and we have some text explaining what it is. Okay, and then there's a lot of information that is taken, like I said before, that is obvious common ground in the village for everybody. You don't need to explain it, but you do need to explain it for a wider audience. Okay. So this was one of the main points, missing context. And in terms of methods, the probably even bigger point is subtitles. Now we all work with subtitles. Yeah, and there's this famous quotation by Umberto Eco in Rats versus Mice, or what it's called, that the translator is not just doing something linguistic, but he's also doing something cultural. And in this case, we can say that obviously we're translating something from the language, which is in this case Komso to English, but we're also translating something from the culture of the Farem people. That's what the Komso speakers call themselves, to a kind of general audience. But this general, or this translation is in fact multi-layered. So we do something from spoken to written, we do something from written language to subtitles, which work in a very different way. We do something from a very close translation to a very broad, and we go from things that are taken for as granted, that are common in the culture, and try to make them more explicit. So we all have worked with Elan. We know that Elan can export a particular tiers as an SRT file, so a subtitle file. And for those of you who have ever tried to do that with your free translation tier and then turned on the player and looked at it, obviously it never works because your translations are not meant to be subtitles, right? So I'll walk you through the kind of thing that I just explained. So in a very close translation here in a bit of Marua's text, you know, he says we're walking here, and the angled brackets are sort of intonation units. Well, we search for rain-making animals whenever we saw rain-making animals, and then he points to a particular one of these. You know, its name is the forest wallaby, the kind of wallaby. We cut it with a bush knife into small pieces. Okay, so we give it a more broad translation as a first step, which would be this. Next step, we take this broad translation and trim it down. Obviously, there are repetitions that we can't sort of display as a subtitle. So the red part is, in this example sentence, the one that was deleted. And we take the trimmed down example, and we look for words that are obviously a rain-making animal. It's not a term in English. And so as I have learned by showing this to various friends, wallaby is not known outside of Australasia very well. Neither is bush knife. So we replaced it with a kangaroo and a machete, things like this, right? And then finally, as a last step, we needed to sort of unpack common ground, that when people in this village Roku, when they say they go and search for animals, obviously they mean they go hunt for animals. So this wasn't clear to a lot of people. So these are sort of, that's what I mean by a multi-layered step from getting from your closed translation in Elan to a sort of to a subtitle. Okay, so I'll I'm going in time.
You're doing good.
Okay, so I'll conclude here because I want to actually show you the video that came out at the end. It's just a 5-minute video. So as a conclusion, I would just want to say working with video is enormous fun. And collaborating with filmmakers is a really rewarding learning process. And maybe everything that I've described, getting material from an archive into some sort of video that you try to show somewhere, post somewhere, whatever you want to do with it, it can be seen as a type of translation. And more generally as a kind of outreach and transfer activity that, you know, some people don't like and others like. So I find it a very good thing to do. And maybe one more point that Elena pointed out to me was that field workers are enormously privileged in being able to go to these places where many other people cannot go to. So, you know, I don't know, we owe it to other people. Or in the words of my PhD supervisor, undocumented languages contain too much information to be wasted on linguists alone. So I'll conclude with that. And if we want, we can, if you want, we have 5 minutes left. Perfect. It's a 5-minute video. Just test something. Okay, today is August 10th. We're sitting here in Chevatak in Roku with Marua, Abia, and myself, Christian. Okay, that's it. Marua belongs to my adopted family in Roku village, in the south of the island of New Guinea. I asked him to tell me a story in his native language, Komso. Komso is spoken by around 250 people. Komso speakers are also fluent in the languages of their neighbors, with whom they have close family ties.
Te kwana trikombun no katima sabe ni mon me no katitwa pyo kwarami no lucir ale to kwana trikombun.
A ketsi is a container made from the bark of the melaleuca tree. Its paper-like bark is folded and tied up with a string on both ends. This container is called no ketsi when it's used for the purpose of rainmaking.
To be the guy what to was he? Someone me miara ure no katima ngabi mon me one saminta imam ko na trikombun tena to kwasi be the guy wo. Kabore budar the sobraram no keke the kwarin taram. What in tell me no kati. Nkanta katan subtran verame. What's bad with that terme? Nemba. Nchingbu, non chingbu. Tell me my yara chobuk. You van a yara chobuk, non chingbu. Anib Svatine. Nkanta murmur. What did the banker in Chequa? Subjacum. No quasi doracasir. No quasi the swim marriage Japanese Subram. Nteyat, Tauri. Anib Subquadrame, Naivame. Katakatarme.
Marua says, Anefov sevquaderme naivame katakatanme. We cut it into small pieces with a machete. Or word by word, Anefov, that's the one. Sevquaderme, we cut it. Naivame, with a machete. Katakatanme, into small pieces.
Anib Subquadrame, Naivame. Katakatarme.
He uses the verb yekwasi, which means to cut, but it's only used for cutting meat. There are several other cutting verbs in Komso depending on what is being cut and how it is done. Before the introduction of metal tools, people used stone axes and bamboo knives. Nowadays, steel axes, garden hoes and metal knives are items that I often bring as gifts when I travel to Roku. Okay, now back to Marua's story.
Kambodne abujet semberda jebersaye. Ades be Maria subuntarame, subquadrame, katakatarme. What's the body of the Dordarame? Bernberma Kaviangarint, Gandabone Sviatine. What in no what's Karisayem Teri? I'm a son good man verame. What's
The pieces of meat immediately begin to rot and to decompose in the tropical heat. The mixture builds up pressure in the bottles.
the Wakanterame Eda Ebot. Some one of the Vab to be Vamene, Feresad. I made them trick and Waramenima. Now, when it to up, Commission Bat, Zabarbo. Nobody of Kaviarit. Jelme, Rocker, Rajaro, Wawa, Weed, Bisakar, Nasi, Dunga, nobody of Terra the Validaram. Kabor Kaviarin Bumbo Samar Waramenge, what the grand to the Kaviakor, where so good the Adam be what to the very many. What the able was Subraram for the book. When Subraram able take, where could so good have to be what to them trick and warm it down for me or versus me. Garingari tak was on Guaramot. Fear or cover. They make anything to let them what's in. Nobody of Swim Mario. Upta Guaramore. Eso.
That's it. Thank you.